All right, we are starting off with education and social mobility. This happens to be topic 5.2. And first thing first, we'd speak about what social mobility is. But before that, let me just quickly walk you through what all would we be discussing today. We discuss what social mobility is. We'd talk about different types of social mobility. We'd move on and discuss the functionalist perspective on social mobility, and we'd counter that with the Marxist perspective. Then we'd compare them both. Then there's this study by Paul Willis that we'd be discussing. We'd also talk about the relationship between social mobility and life chances, and towards the end, we'd conclude this with evidence for and against the idea of social mobility having its or education having its impact on the social mobility of individuals. There were a few questions that I had showed you. I just put them on the screen again. Let's read out those questions first. If you have a look at these three questions over here, all three of them, they're three direct questions on social mobility. The first one is evaluate the view that education is the most important way of achieving social mobility in modern industrial societies. Number two, evaluate the view that education has had little influence on opportunities for social mobility. Number three, evaluate the view that in modern industrial societies, education promotes social mobility. These are the three direct questions that I wanted you all to write down and maybe practice once we're done with this unit as well. Along with these three direct questions, there are numerous other questions. There's a long list of around 10 questions that I'd like to share with you all towards the end, where you might not be directly addressing social mobility, but nonetheless, knowing what social mobility is and adding in social mobility to the questions that I'd show you towards the end would definitely be beneficial. And I hope everyone has either taken a screenshot of this or written these questions down. Now, getting started with social mobility, what exactly is social mobility? When we talk about social mobility is moving up or down the social scale. Social mobility moving up or down the social scale. When we talk about moving up or down the social scale, we're talking about someone getting rich, someone who's poor getting rich, or the other way around. Of course, when we talk about social mobility in general, we are actually referring to upward social mobility because no one would want to experience downward social mobility. Moving up or down the social scale, moving up or down the social ladder, this is how we usually refer to when it comes to defining what social mobility is. So, social mobility refers to the chances people from different backgrounds have of attaining different social positions. The chances people from different backgrounds have of attaining different social positions or moving from one social class or status position to another. Social mobility can be upward or downward. But of course, everyone, like I mentioned earlier, is usually interested in upward social mobility. It could be upward or downward. There are two main ways to measure relative social mobility. Now, I'd want to introduce you all to what intergenerational social mobility is and what intragenerational social mobility is. When we talk about intergenerational social mobility is when you're comparing your social position with your parents' social position, right? If you talk about young adult, his or her social position with his or her parents' social position, right? That is intergenerational social mobility. So, intergenerational social mobility again is comparing your social position with your parents' social position, right? However, on the other hand, when we speak about intragenerational social mobility, intragenerational social mobility has to do with the comparison of your social position today with, let's just say, 10 years back or 10 years ahead, right? So summing it up, intra-generational social mobility is when you're comparing the social position of the same individual over a period of time or over a course of life, right? So for instance, Mr. X, the social position of Mr. X at the age of 30 compared to the social position of Mr. X at the age of 40 compared to the social position of Mr. X at the age of 50. right? That's intragenerational social mobility. Now, as we move on with the significance of social mobility, when we talk about social mobility, when you talk about a modern industrial society, if we talk about a complex society, social mobility has it's a very important defining feature or characteristic of a complex society, because today as we see it, individuals, as we all are living in a society where your achieved status matters more than your ascribed status, right? For this, we need to know what ascribed status is. Ascribed status comes from the word ascription. Now, when we talk about ascribed status or ascription, it's the status that you have got on birth, right? The status that you got on birth is your ascribed status, whereas your achieved status is the status that you've worked for, that you have achieved yourself, right? An example of ascription over here would be, now the I'm sure you all, when you go to your schools, colleges, you have been provided cars by your parents, chauffeur driven cars. They are there people who are there to look after all of these XYZ needs. The point is, what have you done to deserve all of that? To be blunt, nothing at all. You were just lucky enough to be born in a family that could afford all of that for you. And that's an example of ascribed status. Kids over here, you see them carrying cellular phones worth to 50,000, worth 2,50,000 or more. The question is, have they worked for it? Have they earned it? I'm not saying none has. There's a possibility a few have, but then again, majority of them, it's because of the family they belong to. It's because their family could afford that for them. That's an example of ascription. However, if we talk about achieved status, achieved status has to do with what you have worked for, right? Now, what I had said over here was, in our modern industrial societies, in these complex societies, your achieved status matters more today, right? Underlying all this is the idea that contemporary industrial societies are broadly based on achieved social status. This is what I was saying. And mobility. The individual's position in society is not fixed or ascribed by characteristics such as their age, gender, or ethnicity. It is earned or achieved on the basis of factors such as educational qualification. And hence, this is one of the reasons why we are discussing social mobility today, right? Societies where this is the case are meritocracies. Meritocracies, like I have mentioned this numerous times earlier, meritocracy comes from the word merit, a merit based system, right? A meritocratic society is a society that is based on the concept of meritocracy, where if you're working hard, you'd succeed. Those societies where this is the case are meritocracies. Whatever their starting position, individuals achieve the level in society that their talent and efforts deserve. That's and talents and efforts deserve, right? Now, Barack Obama, he was the president of the United States of America. He worked towards that position, right? So, moving on, I hope, I'd like to assume everyone sitting over here does have an idea about what social mobility is. Everyone by now does know the difference between intergenerational mobility and intragenerational mobility. Now, I'd like to let you all know a bit about, uh, or rather, let it be. Should I? Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about it. We could talk about, there are different scales. There are different parameters that are used to measure the social mobility of an individual or the social position of an individual. It is usually done through the occupation of an individual, right? Whatever the occupation they are in, right? And there are different scales. One of the few popular ones are the registrar general scale. You could Google it. you'd have a better idea. You could talk about the Hope Goldthorpe scale. That's another. You could Google that as well. And when if you Google it, if you open the registrar general scale, you'd see how they have defined or categorized different social positions of individuals. It's more like a ladder. There are different steps that are there, right? So when we talk about a ladder, or when we talk, or as we talk about these different steps, if you're taking one step, right, we would refer to that as a short range mobility, right? However, if you're taking more than one step, we would refer to that as a long range social mobility, right? That was just added information that might help you. And now that we have a basic idea about what social mobility is, I'd like to move on and discuss different perspectives on social mobility. To start off with, we discuss the functionalist perspective. So, yeah, when we talk about the functionalist idea about social mobility, how or to what extent does social mobility exist and actually helps? Now, this concept of this concept that was put forward by the functionist perspective about the education system playing the role of a bridge. According to the functionist perspective, your education plays the role of a bridge between your family and the economy. Now, as we refer to, or when we talk about this bridge, because according to the functionist perspective, the education system or formal education actually helps an individual get out of the families overprotected shell, and helps an individual adjust into the economic system. Though, according to the functions perspective, the education system plays the role of a bridge connecting your family from your family life, taking you all the way and helping you fit into the economic system. Right now, taking it a step further, since we're referring to the functions perspective over here, according to the functions perspective, by now this should come without saying. According to the functions perspective, social mobility plays a very important role. It plays a functionally very important role for the society. Now, when I, or as I talk about this importance of social mobility over here, according to, if you remember in the last class, we had spoken about Davis and Moore. We had spoken about how Davis and Moore claim that the education system actually sifts and sorts individuals. The education system actually figures out who it is. It sifts, sorts, grades individuals according to their capabilities, according to the level of intelligence, according to the amount of efforts they've put in, right? And because the society deserves to have the right amount of qualified people for the right roles to play, it is the education system that is helping the society do that. We discussed all of this in the previous class, right? So according to the functions perspective, social mobility, it does exist, and it plays a very important functional role for the society, because it ensures that the important social positions are filled by the people who are most qualified. Remember the last class I'd given you an example about how a chartered accountant gets to live a more privileged life with a better lifestyle because he or she has put in effort and worked very hard to get to that position, right? One. Number two, the second thing that I'd want everyone to keep in mind here, upward mobility is earned through demonstration of individual merit. In other words, until and unless you do not have an incentive to offer to an individual, that particular individual might not be ready to put in efforts. I'd connect this to the example that I was giving a minute back again. You know, a young student of your age, if he or she looks forward towards chartered accountancy, it's the entire package that they're looking towards, right? They it's a lifestyle, it's the pay, it's the privileges, the perks of being a chartered accountant, being hired by multinational organizations, being able to live a better lifestyle. And this gives individuals reasons to put in effort, right? So this pretty much demonstrates individual merit. I hope we get this right. Upward mobility is earned through demonstration of individual merit. In modern societies, which contain a wide variety of occupations, from unskilled workers such as road sweepers at the bottom to highly skilled professionals such as doctors and accountants at the top, people must fill these positions on the basis of their knowledge and skill. Now, one more thing that isn't here, but I'd like to bring this in. According to the since we're discussing the functions perspective over here, according to the functions perspective, all of these institutions, they're working with a purpose, and the purpose is to benefit the society as a whole, right? Keeping that in mind here, do you know what, according to the functions perspective, if someone is not doing well, right, in this system, that again benefits the system. For the people who are doing well, that is pretty evident, they get benefited and the society can benefits out of them as well. However, according to the functions perspective, the people who down the strata, right, they're the people who up at the strata and there are people who down, right? According to the functions perspective, the people who down the strata, even they have a very important role to play for the society, because guess what, someone has to not do well, someone has to not do well, so that the society could have the jobs filled as well, so that the society has enough of people to take care of the jobs that many people voluntarily wouldn't have otherwise, right? Someone has to not do well because the society does require unskilled workers, the society does require janitorial staff, the society does require people who are to work at the lower levels. Just imagine if everyone is super qualified, if everyone has all the knowledge and skills, who do you think would be ready to take care of these jobs that have a lower pay, not a very appealing lifestyle that has to be taken care of as well? I hope you all understood this. Moving on. Now, before we proceed with this functionalist concept of meritocracy, let me remind you all about the social democratic perspective. The social democratic perspective, or the social democratic theory. If you remember, in the last class, we had spoken about the social democratic theory, and what I had said was, according to social democrats, if we provide equality in terms of opportunity, that would result in equality in the society. I think I'll write it down so that there's no confusion. Now, what I'm saying is, according to the social democratic theory or theorists, equality of opportunity provided to individuals, opportunity provided to individuals would lead to equality in society, equality in society. Now, do you know what? If you read this for the first time, this does make sense. But if you have a look at this the second time, it doesn't really make much sense. If you provide equality of opportunity to everyone, that means everyone would have the same platform or opportunities or options to compete. And guess what? Where there's competition, some do well and some do not. तो टेक्निकली अगर आप इक्वालिटी ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं, ये इक्वालिटी ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी, दिस इज definitely going to result in inequalities of outcome and not equality in the society. I repeat, according to the functionist perspective, if we have equality of opportunity being provided to people, अगर आप सबको equal opportunity दोगे, तो that would result in inequalities of outcome. That means there'd be some who do well and others would not do well, and the ones who would do well, who would definitely be in a better position as compared to the people who are not doing well. So technically, according to the social democrats, when they claim that equality of opportunity would result in equality in the society as a whole, this is something that's highly questionable. This is something that's not only debatable, but this doesn't really make much sense, right? Moving on towards the functionalist concept of meritocracy, the first thing that I wanted to clarify over here was, according to the functionalist perspective, a meritocratic system, a system that is based on the concept of meritocracy, involves inequalities of outcome, right? It is inevitable is unavoidable. It is inevitable that mass education systems develop in modern industrial societies because their primary function is differentiation. We all know this, and we've discussed this earlier in the last class when we were discussing the theories on the role of education for the society, topic 5.1. Right now, it is inevitable that mass education systems develop in modern industrial societies because their primary function is differentiation. Differentiation, remember, sifting and sorting individuals, remember the concept of role allocation, allowing individuals to demonstrate their differences in an objective way. Now, we talking about demonstration of differences in an objective way. We're referring to this as objective because everyone gets to sit for the same paper. If you're talking about this education system, according to the functions perspective, again, everyone gets the same opportunity, and hence there's no bias here. For education systems to perform this role effectively, they must be meritocratic. Rewards such as well-paid high status occupation are earned and allocated through individual abilities and efforts in the education system. Such systems are by definition competitive, right? Meritocracies would lead to, you'd say a system is meritocratic when everyone is getting the same opportunity. If everyone's getting the same opportunity, they're all at the same platform, they're actually competing with each other, right? However, competition must be based on equal opportunities. If some people are disadvantaged because of their sex, their race, their social class, for example, then societies cannot be sure that the best people will end up performing the best roles for the society, which again, according to the functionist perspective, is quite an essential, right? So according to the functions perspective, if everyone is not getting the same amount of opportunities, the best people cannot be sorted or sifted. You cannot really pick up best people for the best roles of the society, right? Meritocratic systems involve therefore inequalities of outcome, the same thing, right? According to Parsons, it is fair to give differential rewards for different levels of achievement, so long as there has been fair access to opportunity and fair that these rewards lead on the higher order opportunities for the successful. Like I mentioned a couple of minutes back, if you do not have incentives to offer for people who are ready to put in efforts, that might end up demotivating them, right? And this is because and this is why, rather, schools develop inequalities of outcome through testing and examination. There are some who end up getting an asterisk, A, B, C, D, E, U, right? Though schools develop inequalities of outcome through testing and examination. In a meritocratic system, there must be objective tests that everyone has an equal opportunity to take and pass. This is because role allocation is a mechanism through which those who are intellectually most able and talented achieve work roles that offer the highest rewards in terms of income, power, and status. It's the same thing that I was speaking about a couple of minutes back, right? So, moving on, according to Davis and Moore, education is the proving ground for ability and hence the selective agency for placing people in different statuses according to their abilities. If you still don't get this, remember the example that I gave in the last class, a BCom versus someone who's done chartered accountancy, right? The education system provided everyone with the same proving ground, right? The education system played the role of a selective agency so that it could put people or it could place people there for different roles or status in the society according to their abilities and the amount of efforts that they put in, right? Now, moving on, schools develop inequalities of outcome through testing and examination. Meritocratic system, there these must be objective tests that everyone has an equal opportunity to take and pass. This is because role allocation is a system or mechanism through which those who are intellectually most able and talented achieve work roles that offer the highest rewards in terms of income, power, and status. Harris in 2005, for example, Traditional functionalism, social mobility develops out of the way people are encouraged to perform different roles, some of which are most important, skilled, and difficult to learn than others. I don't think I need to explain you this. It is way easier to get through your BCom as compared to someone trying to get through chartered accountancy, right? The promise of higher levels of status, income, and job stratification by working for educational qualification therefore represents necessary motivation and rewards. These rewards lead to the development of social hierarchies. Some jobs are more important than others, and this creates functionally necessary social inequalities. Get it, everyone? This is what we've been speaking about all along. According to Davis and Moore, the inequalities that flow through social mobility represent an unconsciously evolved device by which societies ensure the most important positions are conscientiously filled by the most qualified people. Get it? I hope we do. If we try evaluating this, inequalities of educational outcome that affect social mobility are justified by meritocracies. Now, there are people who complain there's a lot of inequality in the society, but again, in the functionalist defense, everyone got the same opportunity. Especially if you talk about a complex society, if you talk about a developed country like the UK, everyone got to go to the same education system. Remember, I'm discussing the functions perspective over here. I might as well sound like one, right? Inequalities of educational outcome that affect social mobility are justified by meritocratic competition. However, it can be argued that education systems in modern industrial societies are not meritocratic. Some groups, such as the working class and some ethnic minorities, experience systematic disadvantage, and this systematic disadvantage we'd able to discuss this better as we counter this argument. And I'm assuming everyone knows what we're up to next. We'd be discussing the Marxist perspective or the conflict theories on social mobility. Now, according to the functionist perspective, the education system is meritocratic. According to the Marxist perspective, no, it's not. If you remember, we had spoken about Pierre Bourdieu in the last class. According to Pierre Bourdieu, meritocracy is a myth. According to the Marxist perspective, this social mobility that we're talking about, this upward social mobility rather that we're talking about, is nothing but a smoke screen, something you can see but you cannot really get there, right? If someone is there working in any XYZ organization, they might as well be getting their promotions and all. But then again, do they get to replace their boss? I mean, how many cases do you know of? Now, I'll sound like a Marxist now. How many cases do you know of people who have actually replaced their bosses? Not many, right? Though, according to the Marxist perspective, you, in a blunt manner, you at times have to end up working for people who you think are not even close to how competent you are, but then again, their bosses and your employees, you're working under them, right? To move on, we discuss the extent to which education systems are meritocratic today. Now, like I said, a counter argument to the functionist perspective over here, right? As we take this a step further, the extent to which education systems are meritocratic today. Do you know what? Functionalists, as much as they're very strongly supporting the idea of the education system being meritocratic, we all do know there are some social groups in the society that do experience a lot of discrimination. They do not really get the opportunities that others get, right? For instance, if you talk about the working class or if you talk about some of ethnic minorities, they say they're systematically disadvantaged. Now, why is it? I'd like to talk about this. I talk about the systematic disadvantage that individuals from the working class experience over here. According to Patterson and Yanelli, in 2005, for example, argue that in Scotland, many studies have shown education and the acquisition of educational qualifications are important means through which the middle class families pass on their social and economic advantage to the children. You know what? A counter argument to what the functionalists were referring to, advocating, if we have a look at this through the Marxist perspective, the education system is designed in a manner that it helps the rich getting richer. It stabilizes the position that the individuals from the middle and the upper class hold. Now, how is it that it stabilizes the position? Individuals from the upper class, the elite class, they have the power, privilege pocket to sponsor for the child's education through institutions that the poor or the working class cannot. They have the ability, the connections, they have the ability to arrange for private tutoring, they have the ability for the elite ones to send their uh, children to private institutions. Likewise, the middle class, they have enough of connections, they have their own experience since many of them are educated themselves. It just makes it easier for them to stabilize or to guarantee the child's future success, right? If statistically speaking, if we talk about individuals from elite families who end up going to private institutions, being a part of a private institution in the UK, I'm not talking about Pakistan over here, it almost guarantees your future success. It's not only education there, the connections, the exposure, the experience that an individual has. In that case, if we try scrutinizing this idea that was put forward by the functionist perspective, the education system isn't really supporting social mobility, it's rather restricting it, reducing it, right? It is reducing it because the rich, because they're at a privileged position, they ensure that they make use of their own position to benefit their children. Get this? Now, while meritocratic systems should involve contest mobility, new Marxists such as Bowles and Gentis argue that modern education systems are characterized by sponsored mobility. Now, we need to understand the difference between contest mobility and sponsored mobility over here. Contest mobility is when everyone has the same opportunity, the same platform. They're all at the same position and they're participating in a race. Contest mobility. However, sponsored mobility is what we just spoke about. Sponsored mobility is when the rich, the elite, the individuals from the middle class, upper class, elite class, when they sponsor the child's mobility by making use of their power and position. Get it? So, according to the neo Marxists such as Bowles and Gentis, they argue that education systems today are characterized by sponsored mobility, which is not how the functionalists felt it was like, because functionalists kept on emphasizing on there being mobility, and the mobility functions referred to was actually contest mobility. According to these new Marxists, Bowles and Gentis, आपके पास contest mobility नहीं है, आपके पास instead sponsored mobility है, जिससे फायदा उठाते हुए मिडिल क्लास और अपर क्लास के इंडिविजुअल्स अपने बच्चों को वो प्रिविलेज पोजीशन या एक्सपीरियंस दे सकते हैं जो कि वर्किंग क्लास के बच्चे नहीं दे सकते। एंड अगर हमारा सिस्टम इस तरीके से बना हुआ है तो इसका मतलब है हमारा सिस्टम फ्लॉड है। इसका मतलब है yes there is systematic, yes there are individuals from some social groups who are experiencing who systematically being disadvantaged. Get it? Moving on. By this, they mean that upper and middle class children enjoy a range of cultural advantages over their working class peers, such as the ability to buy high quality, high status private education. They progress from school to high paid, high status employment is effectively sponsored by the parents' class background. And this is what we're talking about over here. Get it? Moving on. In addition, although meritocracy involves open competition for social resources such as education, qualification, or adult employment, Breen in 1997 argues that this only occurs at the lower levels of society. The high levels are marked by social closure. They close by the vast majority, and no real competition takes place within these levels. Like I was giving an example a couple of minutes back while we were evaluating the functionist perspective. There being mobility or mobility existing, so upper social mobility existing at the lower levels. Like I said, individuals do get promoted, individuals from the working class do get promoted. They might end up being a manager, a senior manager, might even end up being a director to an organization. But then again, would they be able to replace the top notch positions? No, they probably wouldn't, because there is social closure there, because there's social closure there. Get it, everyone? And when we talk about this social closure, we are actually referring to higher social levels, right? It doesn't look like, remember, I'd use the term a smoke screen, which I'd use the term a smoke screen to explain you this. Something you can see, something you can dream of, something you wish, something you look forward towards, but you cannot really get there. Get it? Social closure is related to high levels. Social closure is related to high levels of social capital. The networks and connections built through membership of elite private schools such as Winchester and Eton in the UK, or the Lawrence School, Sanavar in India, and universities such as Oxford and Cambridge in the UK, or Harvard and Yale in the USA. Now, like I was explaining this to you all a couple of minutes back, your social capital by only now, do you think if someone goes to this place, this place, this place, this place, I'm sure you've heard of them all, don't you think that's almost guaranteeing them future success? And you even think someone from a working class background would actually make to these places? I mean, you might be able to name a few people, but guess what? There'd be very few. The majority is there because their parents are in a position to afford that for them. I hope you all understand this. This is content I have added from another book. This, by reading this would explain you, this would help you understand the the private schooling system, how the private school education system works and operates in favor of the rich and elite. Now, moving on, taking this a step further, if we talk about a comparison between the consensus versus the conflict approach over here, right? We very clearly did see how the functionalists were so keen, so eager, making the point that social mobility does exist in our society. However, on the other hand, when we spoke about the Marxist perspective, they didn't quite agree to this. From what we read under the heading of neo Marxists, Bowles and Gentes, to what Breen had to say, to the examples of public education system, right? Taking this ahead, while consensus approaches generally see open, competitive, and meritocratic education systems as the most important source of social mobility in modern industrial societies, conflict approaches take the opposite view. Education is not a source of social mobility, but rather the means through which the higher classes are able to cement their privileged social position. I like this one. The high classes are able to cement their privileged social position, right? Remember, I kept on using the word guaranteeing them future success. We all know what cement does. It just makes sure that you are there, right? It stabilizes your position. It does so it does so by ensuring that social mobility is reproduced through a system that appears to be fair but which is really biased in their own favor. To remind you of Pierre Bourdieu again, meritocracy is a myth according to Pierre Bourdieu. Right? The education system, according to the Marxist perspective, keeps a layman, keeps a common man under an impression that it works or operates under the principles of equality and meritocracy. But guess what? This is just an illusion of equality of opportunity, as the Marxists claim it is. For Marxists, Althusser, for example, argues that the reproduction of capitalism involves each new generation being taught the skills, knowledge, and ideas that are required in the workplace. Schools do not just select, allocate, and differentiate children in the interests of a society as a whole. Their role is to help the children of the ruling class to achieve the level of education required to follow their parents' footsteps. Right? Not everyone gets to that position. We had discussed this in the previous class where we spoke about how the vocational education system benefits the rich and elite. The vocational education system, number one, reduces competition because quite a lot of working class pupils choose or opt for vocational education because of their circumstances. Number two, this keeps the keeps them under an impression that there is meritocracy, that there is equality, that they did get a chance, they just chose not to compete. Get it? So their role is to help the children of the ruling class to achieve the levels of education required to follow their parents' footstep. For Marxists, therefore, the role of education is to educate most people just enough to be useful employees, and a small number more than enough to take up high powered elite working roles. This is a nice one here, right? When it comes to the masses, just educate them enough so that they're capable of playing the role that you want them to play. And then the ruling elite, right? The very few people from the rich, privileged background, you educate them more so that they have the knowledge and skills and are in a position to take up high powered, high status, elite working positions and roles in the society. I hope everyone understood this. Moving on, when or rather I'd want everyone to read through this, just read through this real quick and then we'd proceed. Let's move on and start off with Aldrich over here. Aldrich argues that a key feature of modern industrial societies is the lack of occupational mobility. Now, this lack of occupational mobility, this social closure, we have already discussed this a couple of minutes back. Remember when I said there are very few instances when you must have heard of someone from lower down the social scale taking a jump up all the way? How many people do you know of who have moved from manual work right all the way up? It's usually step by step, right? A lack of occupational mobility, right? Now, Eldridge argues that a key feature of modern industrial societies is a lack of occupational mobility for those low down the class structure. To understand how and why this is the case, Marxists argue that what happens in the education system cannot be separated from the demands of the economy. Now, it's the economic system, the capitalist system that has been designed to benefit the rich and elite. They have deliberately designed this system in a manner that it works in their benefit, that it keeps on reproducing the social inequalities that are there in the capitalist society. For instance, if we talk about entry requirements over here, do you know our education system is designed, I'm sure you do know, our education system is designed in a manner that you need to go step by step. You know, if you talk about someone who's around 20, 22 years, 23 years, and all of a sudden they decide they want to get educated, can they just go and get admissions at a university? No, they cannot. There's a proper channel that they'd have to follow. They'd have to get through the matriculation or O levels, followed by intermediate or A levels, and then they'd be able to get into a university. So the entry requirements, I mean, another example, at this point, if any one of you decides to become a doctor, I don't think anyone over here does have the subjects for that. I mean, I'm assuming. right? In that case, do you think you have that option? No, you'd have to go back, do your O levels and then A levels with the right subjects so that you're able to get where you want to be. See, you come from a privileged background, you'd probably be able to do that. Would someone from the working class with a lot of responsibilities from the home as well, what do you even think they'd be able to get through? No, right? Eldridge argues that social closure does not only limit upward intergenerational social mobility from manual occupation to higher status professional and technical occupations, it actually causes it to decline. To tighten entry requirements across higher status occupations means they are closed from below. This means that it is impossible to enter these education occupations without having been through a particular education process. It is impossible to enter these occupations without having been through a particular education process, from A levels through undergraduate and postgraduate qualification to professional entrance exams. Now, children may gain more and better qualified educational qualifications. Now, I think this again comes to us very easily. You've seen, back in our days, if someone had done their masters, it was considered to be good. Not anymore these days. There's more that's required. Or the example that I was giving in the previous class, they if there's someone who wants to apply as a cashier at a bank, they probably ask for a master's degree. The question is what for, right? The entry requirements, they have tightened up these entry requirements to such an extent that things aren't easy. You've seen how we have, I mean, there are so many people, I'm sure almost everyone sitting over here would agree to this, that we have more qualified workforce today. But then again, the I mean, back in my grandfather's days, merely doing matriculation was more than enough. If I talk about when my father was a student, probably doing bachelor's, or if you did your master's, you were super fancy. Does it work like that today? No, it doesn't, right? they there are organizations that are actually demanding for a lot more today for probably the same amount of work. And as Bowles and Gentis put it, the education system plays the role of a gatekeeper in the society. It makes a point. I mean, you go apply for a job, they ask you how qualified you are. And qualification again doesn't always determine if you're able to do what you're supposed to do at the workplace. I'm sounding like a Marxist over here. I have to. Right? Now, according to Bowles and Gintis, cultural reproduction is secured through the correspondence between workplace and educational inequality. Education systems play a gatekeeping role in society, allowing those with the right attitude and orientation through and excluding those with the wrong orientation towards work. Right? If someone tries being a rebel, if someone tries going against the system, he or she would probably be expelled from school. There you go, bang, close. A gatekeeper, the education system. Right? Now, education is not so much a test of ability, then it is a test of conformity. And I had mentioned this in the last class as well. According to the Marxist perspective, the education system does not measure, does not look for how intelligent you are, does not really care about how capable you are. It's your conformity towards what the requirements of a particular subject are. And I remember giving the same example in the last class as well. Regardless of how intelligent you are, if you're not writing your sociology answers the way the examiner is expecting you to write, guess what? You're not getting through. As simple as that. Right? So, according to Bowles and Gintis, in this case, the education system doesn't really test your ability. It's rather testing your conformity towards the requirements of the subject, your conformity towards the requirement of the education system that you're a part of. Right? And guess what? Those who learn how to play the game, they get through the system. And those who do not, they do not really get through the system, or rather those who question it or try rebelling against it, the system very systematically removes them, right? So for someone to get through, they need to show conformity towards the system according to Pauls and Ginters. They need to learn how to play the game, right? They need to learn the rules and regulations that are expected from them to from them, that the education system expects them to know and follow, right? Taking this a step further, while traditional Marxists such as Althusser see education as a tool using by a ruling class to maintain its domination and control, neo-Marxists claim that the relationship between education and cultural reproduction is based on legitimate leadership with the consent of the led. I like that one. That's neo-Marxism all the way. Hegemony, consent of the led. Of course, there's consent of the led. Has anyone blamed the education system? No, they don't. The media, your parents, your family, the system, your relatives, your peer group. If you failed, they'd blame you. No one's going to blame the system, right? So, if it is the student to be blamed and not the system, don't you think in that case it wouldn't be wrong for me to assume that everyone does agree to these rules and regulations? And if everyone is agreeing to these rules and regulations, there is consent from everyone, right? So a neo-Marxist concept, remember, hegemonic consent, or consent being taken from the people who are being led. Forget the fact that they do not get a chance to say no to it, but then again, there is their consent. And guess what? This further gets strengthened by, I mean, there are always people who would, I mean, we do have people from the working class, not many though, but I'm sure everyone does or would know someone or the other, or your parents would make a point that they keep on reminding you of them. Children from the working class, from disadvantaged backgrounds, from the working class, again, children from the working class, there are some who, with a lot of effort, learn the rules for the game. They try to adapt to the right attitude that the education system requires. They put in a lot of effort to overcome the barriers that have been systematically placed in their way, all the hurdles that have been there, and they get through. And guess what? As they get through, they set examples. Don't you think? I'm sure many, a majority over here would agree to this. Our parents time and again keep on giving us examples of children who are from a lesser privileged background who have ended up doing well. And the more examples like these exist, the more there are chances that this meritocracy myth further gets strengthened. Those kids who have gone against the odds, have overcome the barriers that have been systematically placed in their way, crossed all of these hurdles, and proven to succeed and ended up succeeding through this system. They are the ones who are further strengthening, who are further proving this system to be right and all right for everyone. They're the ones who are rather setting examples. This is something we all know of. Quite a lot of you do hear about this almost every other day, right? The role of education as an institution charged with creating well socialized, willing future workers is questioned by Paul Willis. There he is, Paul Willis, this gentleman, Paul Willis. He questioned all of this. He didn't really agree to all of this. I mentioned him in the last class as well. Paul Willis conducted a study on a school that was located in a working class area. And a school that is located in a working class area would, of course, have more of students from the working class background. And according to him, The education system isn't all that successful as the Marxists try to portray it to be. According to Paul Willis, the 12 boys that he referred to as lads, these lads, according to him, they did everything that they weren't supposed to do. They were racist, they were sexist, they did not study, they used to bunk, they were disrespectful, they used to make fun of, they used to bully children or the other students who used to study. And according to Paul Willis, according to this gentleman, they did so because they could see through the system, because they could see through the smoke screen. According to him, the explanation he provides is these boys, they acted the way they did because they did know, even if they do put in efforts, it wouldn't really help them much. And what would a child from working class background end up doing? The best, I'm supporting Paul Willis only for this slide and the next one, since it's him on the next one. So now, according to Paul Willis, these young boys from the working class, the best they could do was get a clerical job, and they found it so not masculine. They knew the education system wouldn't really be able to help them much. They knew even if they did get through the education system, their parents' pocket wouldn't allow them to get or to study any further. In that case, according to Paul Willis, they were able to see through the smoke screen. They were able to understand the chalakia of the system. I hope you all get this. Now, this research suggests that some students are well aware of the limitations of education and work. They see through the system, for example, and consciously rebel against it. I'd like to highlight this. They see through the system and consciously rebel against it. The main question when evaluating this view is how far the experience of education socializes students into an acceptance of capitalist ideology. This study is questioning the entire ideology on which Marxism is based. The idea that the education system runs and operates to make sure that it produces, constantly keeps on reproducing a workaholic, docile, achievement oriented, uncritical, submissive workforce. According to him, how sure can we be that the education system actually does succeed in instilling all of these values? Because from his research, he demonstrates it doesn't happen like that. It didn't happen, rather, for him. He wrote a book, Learning to Labor, 1977. Now, where traditional where traditional Marxism casts teachers in the roles of agents of ideological transmission and control, directly responsible for shaping the understanding or perceptions of students, an alternative interpretation is that many students realize they are destined for low status work and see little interest in learning the lessons that are offered by the education system. Now, I think if you've understood this, you've understood all of this. Now, this is what I was talking about. This is the study that I was referring to. This is the book that he wrote in the year 1977, published in 1977. Who was Paul Willis? Paul Willis was a neo Marxist. And these were a few characteristics of the lads that I have just discussed. The lads felt superior both to teachers and conformist pupils. They used to refer to the conformist pupils, or the nerdies, as you may refer to them, as ear holes. The lads attached little or no value to academic work, little or no value to academic work. During their time at school, their main objective was to avoid going to lessons, or when attendance was unavoidable, to do as little work as possible. They would boast about the weeks and months they could go without putting pen to paper. They resented the school trying to take control over their time. They The lad counterculture was strongly sexist, emphasizing and valuing masculinity and downgrading femininity. It is significant that the lads regarded the year-olds as sissies. I mentioned this yesterday as well, lacking true masculine attributes. And they were racist. Now, I hope Paul Willis makes a lot of sense to you all here. Moving on, the subtopic that we have over here is the importance of education in influencing life chances. How important of a role does the education system play in terms of influencing your life chances? Life chances are the chances you get in life to get what's desirable and to avoid what's undesirable. Your chances to succeed in a, not exactly chances to succeed, because yeah, the chances you get in life to get what's desirable and to avoid what's not desirable, and the consequences of educational underachievement for individuals and for the society as a whole. I'd want everyone to read through this, and once you're done reading through this, I'll just show you a question on this though. Now that you have written the question, if we move on, according to the New Right perspective, if every student does get the same opportunity through the meritocratic schooling system, then educational success or failure results from the different choices people make, right? We're talking about the New Right perspective. According to the New Right perspective, it is the same. If everyone is getting the same opportunity, it's for individuals to decide what route would they want to take, right? You cannot just not compete and then complain about not winning, right? You need to compete first. If you choose not to compete, if you choose an alternative route to that, you aren't really in a position to complain, right? According to Saunders, social mobility is related to education in the sense that it reflects life chances made by different individuals and groups. It reflects life choices, sorry, life chances, no, life choices, right? The life choices that different individuals make, right? This point that we discussed here is being further supported by Saunders. In any competitive system there must be winners and losers. Some people will have more of the good things in life than others. Who these winners and losers turn out to be in meritocratic system is decided or determined by the choices they make, not by factors such as their class, gender, or ethnicity. Saunders argued that it is the middle class pupils who do well, that's because it's them, it's their parents, it's the choices that they make, right? Middle class parents, according to according to the New Right perspective and Saunders in particular, are ready to invest more in their child's future. This investment is not only in terms of the money they're ready to spend, it's the transformation of knowledge. It's about providing the right facilities, it's about motivation, it's about instilling the right values, the attitude that eventually eventually turns out to be a guard against downward social mobility, right? You know what, to put it in a simplistic manner, according to Saunders, the middle class parents, they do enough to make sure that if their child is over here and if the child isn't really putting in a lot of efforts to do better than where they are right now, it at least guards them. It guards them from going further down, right? So, according to the New Right thinkers here, differences in achievement are a result of unsuccessful students choosing not to participate, right? Blame the students here. Unsuccessful students, their families, their parents, it's them who chose not to participate, and if they chose not to participate, they shouldn't really complain about not being able to get through. If a student chooses not to leave school as soon as he or she can and work consistently in school to gain qualifications, he or she would attain upward social mobility. Right? Moving on. According to the New Right perspective, if we talk about marketization forces, or the let me introduce you to this concept of marketization forces over here. You know what? When we talk about, let me give you a bit of a background on this. Let me give you a bit of background. When, or if we talk about our Pakistani education system, and I'm referring to the government education system over here, when people claim about the complain when people complain about the government education system not being good enough, one of the reasons behind that is that the people who running the show, the people who are part of the system, they don't really have any reason to put in efforts. There's nothing, it's just the morality, if anything, that would make them put in efforts. If someone knows they're getting their salaries on time, if the organization knows that they'd be getting their funds whenever required, why would they put in efforts? Don't you think this happens in Pakistan a lot? So, according to the New Right perspective, because remember, when you talk about UK, we're talking about an education system that is funded by the government, right? According to the New Right perspective, if you want to make the education system better, you might as well introduce marketization forces. And when I talk about introducing marketization forces, what I actually mean over here is, according to the New Right perspective, the education system should be designed in a manner that schools get funds according to the number of students they have, right? For instance, if I say this is, let me just do it here. For instance, if I say this is school A, this is school B, this is school C, right? If we're talking about three different schools over here, you know what? If there is a parent over here, if the parent gets a choice of sending their child to whatever the school he or she wants to send them to, don't you think they would want to send their child to the school that has the best performance? That's, oh, that doesn't even look like a star. Oh, right. Let's just say this is one star, this happens to be 5 star, and this happens to be 2 stars, right? You know, if a parent is given a choice to send their child to whatever school they want to, they definitely want to send their child to the school that is doing the best. In this case, it gives this parent all the reasons to send their child to this school, right? School B, that is. And not only that, at the same time, if the schools start getting funds, if the schools start getting funds according to the number of students they have, right? Yeah, what I was saying is, if this parent is does get an opportunity to send his child or her child to whatever school they want to, he definitely want to send their child, his child or her child, to the school that is performing the best, right? And this is, let's refer to this as parental choice over here, right? Parental choice. You know what? On the other hand, if the funding is, if there's a mechanism, or if there's a system designed that provides schools funds according to the number of students they have, I repeat, on one hand, we providing the parent an option to send his or her child to whatever school he or she wants to, right? And on the other hand, if the schools are told that they would get their funds according to the number of students they have, don't you think this school that doesn't really have a lot of students, very obviously because of its performance, would have all the reasons to start putting in efforts? If this school doesn't put in efforts, slowly and gradually the funding would get down and the school would eventually have to experience closure, right? In all of this, don't you think this has resulted in competition? This has resulted in competition, and guess what? Competition in this context would help the education system as a whole get better. Get it? I hope we do. right? So what I was saying is, according to the new right perspective, marketization forces should be introduced in the education system as well. In other words, they tend to favor private ownership of schools. They believe private ownership ensures the consumers' parents have the widest possible choices. Private ownership of schools will lead to a competitive education market, leading to constant improvement in the quality of education provided to students by continually innovating and improving their services to attract and keep customers. Now, if this formula works well for private schools. Now, talk about the private schools and colleges we have in Karachi. They all doing so well. I mean, at least I think they are. They continually are almost always innovating, improving, facilitating, because there's competition. They know if one doesn't do well, they lose customers. Sorry to use the word customer here. Right now, however, even if private ownership of schools might sound like a good way to improve the quality of education, it limits the chances for children from the lower levels of society whose parents cannot afford to pay for an alternative education for the children. There are some parents who don't really have that option, right? The very rich, for example, self-select the children by paying for private education. Those from the middle class self-selected by making sure the children attend the schools with the best academic reputation. However, intelligent working class students who lack the economic, family, social, and cultural capital available to other classes are left to attend schools that fail to recognize their talents, resulting in an academic failure and a lack of mobility. Now, I hope everyone gets this, right? Now, when we spoke about there being more of choice, parental choice, and the formula funding concept that I just explained you, which isn't over here directly but it is there. If you talk about private ownership, yes, there's competition. Competition leads to innovation. Competition leads to your overall performance getting better. However, who does this competition benefit? Again, the elite, the rich, the upper class, the middle class. Where do the working class children go? They don't really have many options, right? Now, and one more thing that I like bringing in a way that we do have here. Do you know what? And I'd like to go back to this one here, this thing. Now, do you know what? If let's say the capacity that this school has is of 200 students, right? And because of its amazing performance, they end up having 400 applications every year. Doesn't this mean they would probably end up being a selective agency? In other words, the parental choice that we spoke about wouldn't really count. It wouldn't really be the parent opting or choosing the school they want to send them child to. It's the school, it's the other way around. Like I said, it's the school that now gets a chance to decide if they want to keep a student or not, right? Now, keeping this in mind, our schools selective agencies, we should not assume that, okay, a child mentioned a college. I wouldn't like naming the child or the college either. But moving on, as school selective agencies, we should not assume that school diversity always means more choice and greater opportunities for social mobility. The new rights probably confuse social selection, where schools choose parents with consumer choice, where only those with substantial economic resources can choose private education. If we talk about this, where schools choose parents with consumer choice, where only those with substantial economic resources can choose private education, right? If you do not have the resources, the school has all the reasons to not let your child in, right? Now, moving on towards evidence and arguments about the links between education and social mobility. Read through this, spend a minute on this, and then let's proceed. We talk about evidence and arguments about the links between education and social mobility. You know what? When you talk about school diversity, in the UK, we have religious schools. For instance, if you talk about Christian faith schools, they allowed to select students on the basis of parental faith. If you still don't get this, the madrasas over here that we have, the religious schools, madrasas that we have over here, the way they choose students on the basis of parental faith. Likewise, Christian faith schools in the UK, they do have this option. However, statistically speaking, it has been seen that they choose a lower proportion of working class children than they actually should be, which is again wrong. One. Number two, this further proves the point that consumer choice, if it does exist, it exists only for the ones who have the resources available. More than that, the second point that we could bring in over here, if we talk about middle class parents, you all know they do have the cultural capital, they do have cultural capital, which puts them in a better position when it comes to them guiding their child through with the selection procedure at a school. You still don't get this. There are so many schools that we have in a city, Karachi, that, I mean, I know kids take a lot of extra supports just so that they could make it up to those schools. Not only me, I'm sure everyone sitting over here knows them, right? In that case, do you think a child from a working class background would be able to afford all of that? Not really. Another thing that I'd like bringing in over here, the third one over here. In that case, the evidence for bright working class children benefiting from the objective forms of selection is again debatable, which it is. The best one is yet to come. Let's have a look at what Saunders has to say over here in a brutal manner. According to Saunders, middle class children outperforming working class children in objective tests, just that we see, what we get to see usually is that middle class children, they end up outperforming or doing better than working class children in an objective, in a system that is apparently very objective, right? According to Saunders, this is wrong. Why is it that we are not taking under consideration the possibility that it's the middle class students who are to be given the credit for this? They're probably able to outperform the working class students because they are more intelligent. I mean, why not? Just because a system is designed, and in this system we see the middle class children end up doing better than the working class children, and we come to a conclusion that the system is flawed. I mean, why is it that we're trying to rule out the possibility that the middle class children could actually be better, could actually be more intelligent? Now, there were 4 points that we've discussed here, and this pretty much brings this topic from your book, topic 5.2, that is education and social mobility, to an end. I'd like to share a couple of questions with you all. I'd want you to write them down or take a screenshot, do whatever. And these questions that I'd show you now, I'm not saying they're all directly about social mobility, but nonetheless, you could use social mobility quite well if you try writing down answers for these. I'll just show you those questions now. So yeah, these are a few questions that you might want to take a screenshot of or write them down. They'd attempt them, I'd say. And these are the questions that are directly there on social mobility. And then we have other questions like these are ones that you see on the screen right now. These questions, uh, I wouldn't say they all directly do require social mobility, but social mobility does play, can help you score well if you add up social mobility to questions like these. Take a screenshot of this as well. And this is pretty much it for today. Take good care of yourselves. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Just type it down. And if not, this is pretty much it for today. Take good care of yourself. Stay happy, healthy, safe, and protected. Stay humble. Spread smiles, spread positivity, and Allah Hafiz. God bless you all.